call the regular meeting in the New Ulm City Council for October 2nd, 2018, 4:30 p.m. to order. First item on the agenda is your consent agenda items. What's your wishes?
I'll offer a motion to approve those.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda items. Any more discussion?
Mr. President, I do want to call out just talk about one item in there. If our city manager could give us a little bit more of an update on, there's an item in there about our railroad concerns that he's had some conversations with individuals with our railroad crossing issues down in the Goosetown area. And I think all of us city councilors have had conversations with citizens that have been complaining, rightfully so, about the bad intersections, the lack of inactivity that we've had down there. But we've had some very recent activity in the last few days. And I would ask if Mr. Grommas could give us an update on that.
Yeah, Mr. President, City Council members, I've had conversation with the Waseca Roadmaster as late as mid-morning today, and at this present time, they're planning on scheduling some temporary fixes that should get us hopefully through the winter on the worst crossings that we have. They don't have the budget nor the manpower at this time of the year to actually finish everything, perfectly. But with the help of the city and their staff, and they'll be hiring some contractors to come in and lay new timbers for the crossings, we should be able to at least get through the winter fairly well at some of the most highly trafficked crossings. There probably will be one or two that may not get addressed just because of timing and materials and manpower, but the worst ones are going to be addressed. And they do recognize that the timbers that are currently located there are not treated timbers, and they last anywhere from 10 to 14 months. They just can't withstand being wet. They dry rot, and then they fall apart, which is exactly what we're seeing at some of the intersections, that the timbers are just, falling apart, and then you got big potholes, and they're bouncing up and down as you go over them. So they're going to attempt to bring in treated lumber, treated timbers, which should last longer. We're talking, many, many years as compared to many months. And they'll do what they can this coming week, probably mid next week is when they expect to be here, and we'll see some improvement at least for the winter, and then they'll be back as I was told in the spring to deal with whatever they need to do to finish up. It will require the city to participate as the. I'm not quite sure why, but the asphalt seems to has gotten taller next to the crossings, so we'll have to get in and mill those down so that you have more of a flat surface all the way across. Right now, if you have three tracks that you're going over, you kind of do the ups and downs, all the way across, and hopefully we can get in there and alleviate that up and down roller coaster kind of effect as they go over. So we'll be working with Mr. Curry and Street Department to coordinate those activities when they're in to fix the crossings. So good news. I mean, this has been going on for probably over a year in general, just in conversation. We had a plan about 30 days ago, and then that roadmaster moved on to a different position, and we got a new roadmaster, and it took a little bit of time to bring that back to his agenda. So we have some movement, and hopefully we'll be better off by the end of next week.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Any more discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. Item 2A, consider motion approving the issuance of a lawful gambling permit for Cathedral of Holy Trinity to conduct bingo and raffle gambling at Cathedral of Holy Trinity, and the date has been changed on that from November 2nd to November 9th.
I'll offer the motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Item 3A, consider a motion approving with conditions the preliminary plot of Depot second edition located at 200 South Valley Street.
like to add the Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval with conditions at the September 27th, 2018 meeting.
Motion to approve with conditions.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Seeing none? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries. Item 4A, number 1 and number 2, consider an ordinance amending section 7.25 of the city code, of the city of New Ulm, relative to regulating special vehicles. Second reading of ordinance number 18-026, fifth series, and a motion to adopt ordinance number 18-026, fifth series. Roger.
I'll offer a motion to waive the second reading of this ordinance, number 18-026, the fifth series, amending 7.25 of the city code of the city of New Ulm regulating special vehicles. And the motion, do I need two motions on that, Roger?
I'd suggest you do it in
Okay.
two.
So I'll just do the motion to waive the second reading of this motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries.
I'll offer the second motion to adopt this ordinance.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Item 5A, consider a motion to schedule a canvass for the 2018 general election for Friday, November 9th, 2018 at 12 p.m.
I'll offer the motion to schedule the meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Item 5B, consider request to trade the old water filtration facility at 12 North and Water Street for adjacent land at Minnesota River, on the Minnesota River. Brian?
The city was contacted by Mr. Jim Sheeman probably close to 7 years ago, and he had shown an interest in discussing this particular city-owned property, as well as it pertains to his property that he owns adjacent to that site. And through the years, I just had always mentioned that if we ever get to that point, we'll let him know. And in the 2018 budget, the PUC actually had consideration of putting funds in there to demolish the building. And so I made the contact to Mr. Sheeman and said, we have a decision point at this time, either demolish or sell or get rid of. During the same time period, within the last probably 10 weeks, a second individual had contacted me about interest in buying the building. They have since that time declined to pursue that. So Mr. Sheeman did send an email, which you see is attached, and it indicates his interest in trading the property for property he owns adjacent to this parcel and adjacent to the Minnesota River. The Brown County information sheet has the city parcel at roughly $174,000, which is probably not real accurate. And the Brown County property information sheet has the Sheeman parcels at roughly $73,000. There has, or there would be a requirement that the city retain easements for all access to get back to the wells across this parcel. There's probably a small section that is actually on the bike trail that we'd want to retain easement on. And then thirdly, underground water pipe that goes next to the building would be retained in an easement format. There likely would be a need to do some excavation and digging to determine the actual piping located underneath the building. Some accounts have the piping going alongside and it's been shut off or terminated. Others have it still going underneath the building and shut off underneath the building, and that's probably not a good thing for our water utility to have. So we would want to at least make sure that that there were no pipes under the building if we were to continue to do this. So there would be a need for the PUC to tidy up their piping in that general vicinity. They may just literally abandon what's there and just plow in a new line. It'd just be so much simpler. So that has not been, identified as what they would do. They would do that after the city council pursued this, if that's what they would like to do. So basically, at this point, the request is from Mr. Sheeman. And you'll note that the Newell PUC received basically the same report at their last meeting on September 25, at which time they released operational control over the building, as they really have no use for it at this present time, other than just the piping that's in the ground. Since that time, Mr. Hippert, commented before the meeting that the new utility director, Mr. Marshall, might have some comments that he would like to make on behalf of the PUC on this particular site. So if there's any technical issues, I guess I would request that Mr. Marshall come up and also explain his concerns or issues that he'd like to present.
Thank you very much.
I don't think that's on yet.
Yes, Adjourn.
So I've got a GIS representation of the utilities that we understand to be in the proximity of the building. My interest is to make sure that we address those each and relocate them as required. The blue line is the water line. The blue lines are an indication of feeds of raw water from the north well field. In addition to that, what's not shown in this GIS image is the ingress egress easements that are required to get in and out of those wellheads. So want to make sure that we pay attention to that as well. So wellheads here, and this goes to the north well field as well, and this goes to another well that's located approximately here. The red lines here indicate the power supply to each of these wellheads. Also within the property here, we'd like to retain easements for those. And then the yellow lines, which are much more difficult to see on this image, are the gas lines that go out and provide heat service to the individual wellheads. In addition to these gas lines here, we have a high-pressure gas line that goes along the frontage of the building. So the concern there is it's about 250 PSI. I want to make sure that we have adequate separation from anything that might be done with the footprint of the building, in addition to keeping a minimum setback from this line. It's imperative that we don't disturb the existing soil around that line. It creates a potential leak. Now, a couple of other items to see here. The red here is an indication of the location of the transmission line. It looks in this image as if it's almost coincident with the edge of the building. The challenge there, of course, is that that doesn't meet minimum setback requirements for the transmission line and the distribution line that's built under that from the frontage of the building. So, it would be a concern that we would want to investigate and make sure that we have that addressed. There is a forced main sewer here in front. We just like to maintain the easement for that, depending upon what the usage ends up being. Now, anecdotally, inside the building, I've been inside briefly. There's a strong mold odor inside. I don't know if it's toxic mold or not. I would recommend an assessment of the mold inside the building before anybody else enters the building without the appropriate PPE to ensure that it's a safe environment to enter. If we want to proceed without that, of course, people would have to be in the appropriate PPE in order to protect themselves from the potential for toxic mold. There may be some other items in there that would be identified in an environmental assessment. Lead paint is suspected. There may be asbestos. But like I said, I didn't spend much time in the building once I smelled mold. The other thing that's known is presence of bats in the building. I don't know if they're threatened and endangered species. There are 7 bats in the state of Minnesota, and I don't know what species this one is. Probably prudently needs to be assessed. Why am I bringing this forward about the condition of the building and the assessment? It becomes a liability. If we know about it, we sell the building, they do an assessment, then we have to come back and clean it up. I mean, my mode of operation really is I would much rather know about it and deal with it appropriately in advance than wait until somebody else finds out and then we have to come back and recover from that. So similarly, the building footprint is shown here. Our GIS indicates that these water lines are directly underneath, but I've got conflicting information, as Brian indicated, with the location of those lines, whether they're there or not. I think we have to do an exploratory excavation to establish exactly where they are. So that could be done with a Vector truck that we own, but you know, the idea is that it would be much better if we understand where the facilities are, make sure that we write the correct easement, and then get them in place. So those are my concerns. Any questions?
A comment I want to make, it sounds like, I don't want to act on this tonight, it's kind of premature. Yet utilities come back to us what they have to do. I do have one question for the Community Development Director. I used to know this, I apologize. I know it's all in the floodplain. Dave, if they would go through with this, would they be able to come in for any kind of conditional use or whatnot to fill in the front half of that property where now it becomes buildable or usable?
Dave Schnobert, Community Development Director. I think we've always been under the impression that the property was in the flood fringe. So if they took appropriate action to, elevate above the
So it would
that
become a
elevation, then they
usable
could-
piece of property?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
So, Mr. Hippert, on this property, as Mr. Marshall's talking about it, if we were to sell it with the conditions that he just brought up, knowing that they're out there, where is our liability there? Can we talk about that?
Mr. President, Councilor Schultz, my input on that would be, I think the city can sell the property as is. I think we can sell it with disclaimers of any responsibility.
Big letters, there's bats in this building, right?
But I think, depending upon any buyer's intended use, we also want to make sure it's safe, it complies with the code, so we're not just a private party, selling off a building that we own. And, with these potential issues, whether it's Mr. Sheeman or anybody else, they should be aware of them. If there's an exchange or a purchase, and then the city refuses to allow a certificate of occupancy or otherwise takes action, the buyer's got some obligation to investigate, but, I wouldn't want there to be bad feelings that somehow he was duped into something.
Right.
So, but I think we can legally restrict our liability as far as any claims coming back that would require us to take any remedial action.
The next question I would have is, I know, Mr. Marshall, you're new, but have we exhausted all thought processes on any other uses for this building in the PUC world, in the city world, for, the highway? I mean, any of the street department, I mean, storage is always important in government. Is there any other options that we've thought about for redevelopment of this building for city purposes?
We are currently using the building for storage. I understand that Parks and Rec is using part of the building for storage, as is the water department, to my knowledge. So, of course, I'm concerned about it in its current state, but that is one option that we could explore. Other uses, I think its access may be a bit challenging at
Pretty
times.
limited.
So, and then I don't know where the floodplain sits in terms of where it is. I think that there's been water over these, close to the access roads for these wellheads recently, so within the past couple of weeks. So that's what I have so far. I mean, I'm more than happy to explore further and see what other potential uses.
Maybe, Dave, maybe you could show on the map how high the water has been.
There has been water inside the building,
Correct.
so at least on a couple of occasions.
All right.
And there's two levels to the building. The back side of the building, obviously, is much lower than the part that's up in front that you see when you drive up to it. And the backside is going to be much wetter location. That's, anything that we would store in there in its current condition really has to be like what we're using, dirt. And we got a pile of dirt in there
Yeah.
just to keep it dry in case we need to have dry dirt in construction in the wintertime, so it's kind of like anything that's in there is going to be rusty, anything, that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And it could be sealed up. I mean, there's actually, like skylights that are broken that allow the rain in and allow the bats in. I mean, there's things we probably could have done through the years to seal it up better.
Right.
But it's just not been one of those buildings that we would be
And nothing you
using.
really want to invest in either
No.
with that floodplain area, right?
There's a tremendous amount of electrical power panels at that location because there was a manufacturer in there. And there's lots and lots of large panels.
Right.
It'd be great if, you could remove that building and put a different building up, for industrial purposes. But the building is solid concrete and it's set up for a particular purpose. And it's just not, usable other than, probably a storage or a shop or something that is a small use of that space.
Yeah.
Maybe, Brian, you might want to touch on how much the demolition was proposed,
Yeah, I think the water department had, plugged in a $300,000 figure to tear
Wow.
it down. I mean, it's solid concrete. It was made to last.
Yeah.
The roof is concrete. The walls are concrete. It's a sturdy building.
And the proposal in front of us is what would we come up with a purchase price to trade properties?
Yeah, I think the concept that the
What the neighbor
the
wants.
Brown County property information sheet is probably on our building, not a reasonable estimate of value,
Yeah.
given its current situation. And to be quite honest, the property information sheet on the Sheeman parcels may or may not be legitimate either. Last year, for the better part of the fall, that Sheeman parcel was underwater. You can't really do much with it, and the stuff that's next to the river that has trees on it, you really can't do much with it. So both parcels don't have a whole lot going for them because of their location. The water was up to, we'll call it the north side of the building on the Sheeman parcel. That's about as high as the water gets on that parcel. And then, obviously, when the river goes down, it recedes back to the river.
Yeah, the floodplain boundary in that area, where the bike trail is, it's generally in that area. So
Right.
the whole building is actually within the flood fringe district. And then it extends to the north, it's the Water Street right away, but also it's where the bike trail is.
So I think what Mr. Sheeman, when he contacted me both by phone and by email, he was just basically saying, how do we decide what value is? And value, you get an appraiser and say, I've looked at other properties like this and they've sold for this and that and come up with a number so that if we were going to trade, it's an even trade or it's here's my land plus cash, whatever it is. And so we weren't going to tie ourselves into actually approving anything. The next step would be if we're interested, would be to maybe have the PUC look at if they can find out any more information on the piping, and then secondly have have value determined through an appraisal of some sort. Now, that's gonna cost something. And I don't know that there's too many comparable sales of our building, much less the comparable sales of that flood land there, so,
Well,
but maybe
Mr.
there is.
Mr. President, if I can interject a couple of points on what the city manager's describing here. If we were going to do appraisal reports based upon my experience with licensed appraisers, I think the cost would probably be at least $1,000 per parcel. So you're probably looking at a minimum of $2,000, maybe more than that. If you wanted to move forward with appraisals, considering the easements that we require, I think the appraiser would need to get that information, because that could affect his valuation. So the first step, I think, would be to try and lock in the location for the easements, then hire the appraisers and get that information and get it back to both sides and see if they still wanted to move forward.
I guess where I'm coming from, it's probably in the best interest of the city and the PUC to get rid of this property in the long run. And, I mean, we can do appraisals or we don't have to do appraisals. I think we need to have the PUC study the thing, see what easements we need, get all the facts together, and then move forward from that point. And, I mean, I'm not gonna oppose a swap and be over with. I mean, it's in our best interest. Just what Larry made the comment, I don't think we really want it. Long run, let's get rid of it.
But in the long run, would it just become a dilapidated another city building that everybody's gonna have to stare at for the next 50 years? I don't know.
I don't think it's gonna change. It's concrete, I don't,
think it's just gonna stay
it's
there.
gonna sit there forever unless it fades, about it. It's not gonna fall apart.
I mean, it's obvious Mr. Sheeman knows what he wants to do with it, or he
Yeah.
wouldn't be asking for it.
Right. That's what I'm
And, it
wondering,
puts
like,
it
what
on
does
the
he want
tax
with it?
roll, so it's gonna generate some more taxes, and
Yeah?
you reevaluate it in that aspect. And so, I mean, I guess I wouldn't be opposed that we do some preliminary digging to find out where the water is, if
Yeah,
the water
I'm
mains are underneath
fine
the
with that.
building, find out the necessary easements that we need, and move forward, and then write it up and do a swap. That's,
We've been talking about where the water pipes were underneath this building for probably 10, 12 years. This might be the time that we have to actually decide. We can go in and
Yeah.
figure out where they are so we know what to move and what not to move.
Yeah.
Because it's always going to be there. If it's not this particular person requesting it, maybe somebody else will, then at least we got that information.
well, even if we're gonna go demolition it, we need to know where the main
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
So to cap it off, or, in those capacities. So is that something that we're gonna consider to do in-house with our water department?
Yes. Sorry. Yes.
Thank you.
So what kind of motion do we need here?
Well, I would think that, we table it at this point in time until we
Just
get
More
information from the
information?
PUC.
Okay.
That'd be great.
I'll offer a motion to table this issue for further information.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to table. Any more discussion? Seeing none? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you, Rod.
Thank you.
Item 5C, consider motion approving the final assessment rolls of the 2017 Utility Street and Alley Improvements Group 1 and set a date for public hearing for Tuesday, November 6, 2018 at 4:30 PM.
I'll move it.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Seeing none? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Item 5D, consider motion establishing the special assessments for the 2018 weed and snow removal and set a date for a public hearing.
So move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, and the date for public hearing is November 6, 2018 at 4:30 PM. Any more discussion?
My only comment is I'm surprised that that's all we have for a whole year. It seems like we get a lot more calls and reports.
It's just a matter of who actually pays them once they're billed and who lets them go.
Well, some people pay their bills, you're right, okay. I guess I'm just thinking of all the complaints.
These are not paid.
These are the people that don't pay. All right, never mind. How many, let me just ask the question, how many actually pay?
I honestly don't even
Don't know.
know for sure how
Okay.
many there were invoiced this
All
year.
right, just curious.
Any more discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Item 5E, consider resolution to support the application to the Minnesota Department of Transportation for a grant funding regarding the creation of a Regional Transportation Council. Chris, got something on that?
Good evening, Council President, councilors. The Minnesota Valley Council of Governments had approached the city to support a letter of support for an application for the Regional Transportation Coordination Council. And what that council will be doing is addressing transportation issues for the disadvantaged, which would be older adults, individuals with disabilities, individuals with low income, and or military veterans. So it's getting stakeholders together to address those needs. And so they just want our support for their letter of support for the application.
Okay, thank you. Any questions?
I'll offer the resolution, waive the reading.
Second.
We have a motion and a second off the resolution, waive the reading. Any more discussion? Seeing none, Finance Director, please call the roll.
Counselor Fisher?
Yes.
Counselor Mack?
Yes.
Counselor Schultz?
Yes.
Counselor Christian?
Yes.
President Schmitz?
Yes, motion carries. Item 6A, consider accepting a list of claims paid and approve a list of claims to be paid. Claims paid in the amount of $936,520.27 and approve of claims to be paid in the amount of $697,510.80.
I'll offer the motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on any? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. With no more business, meeting adjourned.